Sean.
Marco.
We are here to deliver a message from the RSA conference team.
It's an important message from our friends. RSA Conference 2025, just around the corner, where insights drive action, solutions emerge, and community connections spark innovation. You'll be there. I'll be there. We invite everybody else to be there April 28th through May 1st. You can secure your spot at rsaconference.com/ITSPmag25. That's ITSPmag25. See you all there.
I'll be there. See you there.
Marco.
Sean.
It's my favorite time.
Christmas? Halloween? No. Easter.
Those are all great. Those are great events, but story time has a little more meaning for me, and a little longer shelf life than a day of the year.
Yeah, and I'll tell you more. On top of being a favorite thing to do a brand story, it's also my favorite thing to do the first brand story with a new company, because we can tap into the origin story, which is what I really, really enjoy, why a company start doing what they do and what kind of problem or topic they're focusing on resolving, and how that started. So yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the tech and forget that there are people doing things for a reason. Typically, they want to help somebody solve a problem, or a company solve a problem, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm thrilled to have Cam Roberson on from Beachhead Solutions. Cam, how are you?
I'm terrific. Thanks for asking.
It's great to have you on the show, and we're excited to hear all about the how and the why and the when and for what reasons Beachhead Solutions exist, and we're going to get into that. Before we do that, maybe a few words from you on who you are, maybe some of the things you've worked on leading up to your role, and what is your role at Beachhead Solutions.
Happy to. And just a moment ago, Marco said we were new. We've been around for about 20 years now. Beachhead was originally born of military applications. A branch of our military was looking for a way in which to figuratively blow up data that was attached to Humvees and other vehicles that were on PCs. And if those vehicles became compromised, they didn't want the data to be also compromised. So
we're talking get smart type stuff here.
Kind of get smart type stuff. And we looked at several different approaches, including, amping up the cycle times to actually cause an incendiary event. We didn't go that route ultimately. And by the way, this is a function that is still available in the product today. Data can be overwritten to a DoD 7X overwrite standard in the product. And sometimes that's the appropriate approach. Most often, though, today, people are looking for a recoverable, a more granular approach to access control. And so we have the notion of quarantine, which is essentially to remove access to the data. And there are a variety of different ways of doing that. But we built this originally for those applications, but commercial applications became particularly, in the early days of laptops where there was, it was the wild, wild west, and data was out there all over the place. And organizations finally realized they needed to control that data and be sure that it didn't get in the wrong hands. And so we started selling through a variety of different resellers and direct, although our primary focus today is in the channel. But and I personally started, building the marketing presence for the firm. First, before I even became an employee, they were a client of mine. I had an ad agency that I sold in 2005. I was already helping them with their collateral, with their messaging, with their website, and various other things. My organization was. And I sold the firm, and they, just kismet. They asked if I'd be interested in coming on board. And I said, yep, I already got a head start, kind of know what you're trying to do here. And joined the firm. Oh boy, quite a long time ago when we were still in our infancy, I'll say.
That's very cool. And when I say new company, I knew you were being around for a while. I meant new company in ITSP Magazine for us, because I know you were going way back. And
overnight success.
An overnight success that usually takes a very long time, as we all know. So you said something that kind of makes me laugh, because you said it was the wild, wild west. And now I feel like maybe we just take one wild out and it's just Wild West for the data. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It ain't getting any better. It's still wild, wild.
Well, you cut one wild, it's already something.
There you go. Yeah, these events continue to happen. Data breach, data exposure, it's no matter how high we build the castle walls and the perimeter around our stuff, our data, they breach it, they get it. And so it's just a cat and mouse game in many respects. And so, our approach is a little bit different, in terms of, we almost make the assumption you're going to get infiltrated. Somebody's going to get to your stuff. Then what? Do you have a protection after that? And, we think we have a pretty good story. We've been providing a lot of this for quite a while. And I think finally, well, maybe not finally, but it's sort of developing compliance. People were once upon a time left to their own devices to determine what good security was. We continue to have breaches. So clearly, these organizations' definition of what good security was insufficient. So, finally now these organizations are telling us exactly what they want. And we were in a good place, because exactly what they want is very much what we provide. We don't believe we are a replacement for stuff. We are an augmentation of stuff and provide controls that many of the other quote unquote security tools don't provide.
Well, let's talk about some of that. I mean, for doing this for so long, certainly the network looks different. The endpoints look different. There's those all connect to a cloud, which is not new, but still growing in many ways, and on-premises services, and a lot of stuff driven by big providers like Microsoft and Google and the like. How did you foresee some of those changes, and what do you think is coming that you are already prepared for to help organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the big recognition, the big realization, and in my mind anyway, is stuff is moving to the cloud for good reason. And if you haven't noticed, we're being forced to move stuff to the cloud. I get frustrated with some of that big company up in the Northwest, forcing me to do stuff I don't want to do. But in any event, so the premise, of course, or I think the wishful thinking is, well, there's no data on these devices. The data's all up in the cloud. And in fact, that is not the case. There's data all over the place. And if somebody can do their job easier, better, faster, they'll have the data locally. And so making the assumption that all of this new technology or this cloud-based infrastructure is going to eliminate risk is flat, incorrect. And so, good security is still good security. Now we just have more definition, and we have that definition around the compliance mandates. They're becoming more, more enforced, more specific. We're using a lot of the mandates are pointing to, NIST frameworks, for instance. So this, as I said, once upon a time left to the devices of the organization to determine what good security is no longer the case. We are going to tell you what is good security and what's required. And it's certainly more comprehensive and more involved than simply building the the walls higher, having a terrific EDR, XDR, or next gen antivirus in place. We're going to specify how we want to handle, expired data. We want to talk about the threat surfaces that every single employee is, and what we want to do to address that issue. Access controls, automatic access controls, all of those things are going to be defined, and they are. And so it's coming. Be prepared. And at some extent, every organization, I don't care how small, you will be affected. So, the time is now, in my opinion, to sort of get prepared, understand what's necessary, and get those things in place and be able to document it. I guess that's, you're not compliant until you can prove you are compliant. So that's also very important.
So Cam, it's hard, I think, lately to talk about cybersecurity and the things you just said, the assumption that something is going to happen, somebody's going to come in the perimeter, you're not behind a wall, and it doesn't matter how tall it is. Somebody's going to probably drop in with a parachute anyway. But the point is, it's hard to talk about this without thinking about the concept of zero trust, right? And I know that somebody thinks zero trust is like, oh, nobody's allow it. You can't do your job. It's
right.
But there is a concept of zero trust that I think it needs to be applied to cybersecurity. What's your view on that?
That's a really good question. And zero trust is certainly the phrase of the day. But we always look at things, top security on one end of the spectrum, and usability and employee happiness at the other end of the spectrum. Zero trust is oftentimes going to provide terrific security at the expense of maybe productivity or customer satisfaction, if you will, or excuse me, not customer satisfaction, but employee satisfaction. Our thinking on this topic is that we provide a sort of a trust but verify approach, which is to say, allow the user to access the data, allow the user to do their job, as best possible. But if we see behavior or conditions or environmental factors that don't look right, we're gonna control access based on that escalation of risk as we define it, and it's a function that, and I don't want to make this a pitch about Beachhead, but we have a tool that we call the risk responder. The risk responder looks at these events and takes automatic defensive action against them in an appropriate way. So, we can't be looking at every device 24/7, 365 from a SOC or anywhere else. But our product will look at stuff and say, is this reasonable? Let's take some measures automatically because it doesn't look right. So that's sort of our approach. Zero trust, is getting sometimes a little too onerous, I think, my perspective.
So you said, and it's obvious, right? It's a buzz phrase. I think we've had many conversations on this topic, and it's a mindset that I feel needs to be applied based on an organization's risk appetite,
right?
In line with what they're trying to achieve as an organization, right? What are their business outcomes mapped to the risk? How do we get there safely?
Right.
And so I guess my question to you is what are some of the interactions you have, or what are some of the drivers you encounter? Compliance is certainly one. Having an incident is another. But are there other scenarios where organizations say, we really want to get a handle on our mobile environment, or we're moving forward on this new business process, and therefore we're going to have data in these locations. We really need to figure out how we manage our data more effectively on all these devices and whatnot. I guess describe to me some use cases of how you engage with some of the clients you work with, either directly or through some of your partners as well?
Yeah, good question. We we're ultimately around making sure that data, both proprietary PII and IP, is secured from a competitive standpoint. And then, of course, what's driving the compliance mandates is that data of which you're custodial for. And so ultimately, it's about protecting that data. And frankly, proving that you're protecting that data. Because if you can't prove you're compliant, you ain't compliant. And so our customers are using it just because they need to protect data. I mean, that's ultimately, we like to think that's the altruistic reason for it. Sadly, some are altruistic. They want to protect data, but a lot of times it's, I must do it. Somebody's telling me I must do it. That is where the compliance is coming into play right now. We have, many instances of our partners who have made the decision just to have a better secure environment for their clients, where the client is coming to the MSP provider and saying, look, we just got a supply chain questionnaire. What are we doing to address all of these requirements? We've just, we provide the nut for a bolt on a device that ultimately ends up in something with military applications. Now we have to be CMMC level 1 or, level 2. I need to show to my customer that we are doing so. And so help me understand this stuff. And so our older clients understand, our older MSP partners understand that they're providing it. They have the answers already. Today, we are getting a lot more come to us because they need to be able to show this stuff and they need to be able to prove it. And so we've got some anecdotal stories, of course, too, that are kind of interesting. We had one of our MSP partners show up at a medical facility, and one of the laptops that they're managing was on the front lawn porch area of this particular medical facility. Somebody got so frustrated, they just tossed it out the window. It was there for anybody to take.
Wow.
That's good.
It's crazy, some of the stuff you hear. It really is. We had another, this happens quite frequently. USB storage devices, sort of one of the most, oft breached items. Employees, they hold a lot of data, either the hard drives or the flash sticks or whatever. Many times we've seen, or it's been told to us, that an employee has put data on their customer lists, IP, stuff that gives them sort of a starter kit with creating their own competitive business to their former employer, and have just taken the stuff on there. Huge files, thinking they're,
a starter kit.
Yeah, business starter kit.
Yeah, I was actually reading that the USB attack are coming back in fashion. So be ready to collect something in the garage when you park the car, like right there on the ground. Listen, tell me a little bit about your relationship and how you guys work with the MSPs and your partner ecosystem that you have in place, and how everything works together and is not just depending on you being the one going around and telling what to do, what not to do.
Right. Well, it's entirely cloud-based. Maybe of interest to your listeners is the product and the protections are free for our MSP partners for their internal use. So maybe a little gimmick, but obviously they should be using the product themselves because they are also at risk and also part of the security and compliance chain. So we provide the product for their internal use free. We don't look at this as an opportunity to make money off of our partners, but with our partners. And so we obviously would like them to resell it. It's very simple. You know, they're billed monthly based on their usage. So if they have 499 devices, in management, that's what they're billed for. They lose a client, which unfortunately happens from time to time, and the next month it's 473. Then, that's what their invoice will be. We also take a very, I'll say, hands-on approach with our partners. We want them to be successful, so we train them very well. We provide sort of concierge service in terms of training and so forth. It's never been something we charge for, either at the outset or 12 months down the line, and they bring in new team members. And from our perspective, we provide tools that allow an MSP to sort of demonstrate their value, to demonstrate that they're not a commodity service provider, but they have tools in place, demonstrable tools that really distinguish their practice from the others. And so reporting and this risk responder concept, which is not rocket science. It's what are we going to do when a device travels outside of an acceptable area? Or what are we going to do when network-borne attacks are hitting our system? What are we going to do if software is tampered with or removed or whatever? And so we try to provide a very synergistic approach with our partners. We're there to help them be successful. And so we provide tools that they can demonstrate to their clients that show them their value above and beyond what an ordinary service provider does. And so that's very important, because if the client doesn't understand the value, then, you're not differentiating your offering from the others. And frankly, this happens often. Many times the end client doesn't understand this stuff to the level that the MSP does.
And to be honest, Cam, they have to run their business, right? I mean, we always said that. They're not the cybersecurity expert. That's why they hire the experts, and that could be you, your partners, the MSPs, and all of that. So,
well, and to that point, I'm going to jump in here because I think, clearly you serve directly and through your partners a variety of organizations, small, large, different industries, different sectors, different needs. Mm-hmm. Are there a few examples of some outcomes where, it's hard, yes, from a compliance perspective, you can demonstrate, right? So that's an outcome.
Right.
But from a business perspective, are there any stories you can share where organizations open up new markets or new products and services or something beyond just the compliance piece?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It's, as I said, it's about data access control. Who's got access to your data? That device that went out with the business starter kit, for instance, was wiped. And that employee who had designs on creating a competitive business in that market ultimately did and failed, did not get their business starter kit because the data was essentially wiped. They had no access to it. And so, that's just an example. And as I mentioned before, that happens a lot. That happens quite a bit. The regulated industries, FinServ certainly, HIPAA, sort of the bellwether to all of this. Now, supply chain, government supply chain.
Are you doing much with CMMC?
We do. Interestingly enough, we are seeing, adoption and many more requirements for CMMC. We've got a couple who are authorizing agencies for getting the compliance. Interestingly enough as well, a lot of people are finding out that they're regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and are subject to FTC safeguards rule. we heard a couple, well, I guess it was early last summer, of auto dealerships in particular, who probably are pretty fast and loose with their security rules using, personal emails and things of that nature, who the FTC went after quite hard. And so this, they reluctantly had to follow the guidelines there. Some of them are pushing back, just as HIPAA covered entities did 7 years ago. But they're also learning that they must follow good security practices.
Right. So I think we are, Cam, from what you said, going from the wild, wild west to where people realize that they need to, either because they're forced to by regulation, or they are playing ahead and avoid issues coming up. I think at this point, it's not news. Well, it is news always in the newspaper about breaches and all of that. But I think a good business, even a small mom and pop shop, they're aware of cybersecurity. They know what it is. And I think in the end, as you mentioned a few times, it's about trying to make it easy for them and give a solution that they can apply without having the need to have an IT team in their small business. So to close this, if somebody now listening to this episode, they say, you know what, I think it's time for me to make a move, or I want to upgrade the situation I'm in for cybersecurity, think about the concept that you discussed, the services that you offer. What's their first step? What can they do?
Well, it's, if they're a direct client, get an evaluation in place. We do that routinely. It takes about an hour to get it somebody with an account, with licenses, trained fully with that concierge sort of service. As I mentioned, it's the same with a reseller, an IT service provider, though in their case, should they become a partner, those licenses will still be free. Actually, if they choose to become a partner, they're free. If they choose not to become a partner, they're free. We just give them access to a higher level, MSP management console where they can create their own client accounts, add and subtract licenses, and so forth. And so it's a matter of just getting in touch with me or my team. We'll set them up, hours time invested, and they'll be able to kick the tires at their leisure and use the product as long as they'd like.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here for a brand story on ITSP Magazine. Appreciate you sharing a little bit about the history of Beachhead Solutions and what you do for your customers and for your partners. I think it's an excellent point that the partners are part of the supply chain. So having them be secure along with them and along with you and their customers is super important. So,
well, it's been my pleasure, and thank you.
Yep. So thanks everybody for listening to this episode, Brand Story with Sean and Marco, and many more coming your way. So stay tuned, and please do check out Beachhead Solutions and connect with Cam online and start your journey.
Sean.
Marco.
We are here to deliver a message from the RSA Conference team.
It's an important message from our friends. RSA Conference 2025, just around the corner, where insights drive action, solutions emerge, and community connections spark innovation. You'll be there. I'll be there. We invite everybody else to be there April 28th through May 1st. You can secure your spot at rsaconference.com/ITSPmag25. That's ITSPmag25. See you all there.
I'll be there. See you there.